Hi everyone, welcome to Couchbase Coding with Matthew Groves. This is a 10-minute slice of my day as a developer advocate, live every day on Twitch, YouTube, and Periscope. Check out the old episodes up there, the link at the top of the screen. Please email me your tweets, comments, questions, suggestions. I'd love to hear from you. I'm already seeing one comment in the chat room, which is in some sort of language I'm not familiar with, so I apologize if I don't understand that. If you could post that in English, I'd be happy to address that. Alright, so today I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing most of this week, which is Google Autocomplete Asks. So I mentioned this already yesterday, that a new one on this list is actually Couchbase How to Set Bucket Passwords. So I thought I would talk about this a little bit today. I'm going to answer this question first, and then I'm going to tell you why this is something you can no longer really do in Couchbase and why that's a good thing. So let's get started here. I've got several Docker images standing by here, so I'm going to start with an older version of Couchbase. This is Couchbase 4.5.1 Enterprise. So let's start that one up here. And so this will allow me to actually just answer the question literally here first. So this will take a few seconds for it to actually spin up the Docker instance. But in Couchbase, the fundamental sort of place you store data is called a bucket. That's a collection of documents, basically, is how you think about it. I'm using these terrible credentials right here, administrator and password. Don't use those, folks. Those are bad credentials. Okay, so here is an older version of Couchbase, and I've got no buckets. So I'm going to create a new bucket, and I'm going to call it Matt's Data. And it's a Couchbase bucket. It just needs to be a small one. 100 is fine. And so I want to talk about mainly. Whoa, why is it 100 floating there? That's a wacky little thing. Is Chrome doing that? Okay. Anyway, I want to talk about this access control here. This is the important part. So when I'm creating a bucket, I can specify a password here. But this is optional. I can also leave this bucket unsecure. Basically, you don't need a password to start putting data in here, accessing data. My advice to you is always put a password on this and make it a good one. Because especially if you're going to expose this Couchbase cluster to the internet, even if you're not, make it a good password on here. But it is optional in Couchbase versions 4 and earlier. Alright, so we'll go ahead and save that. And so there you go, and I can also, I think, go and change that password as well if I need to. Okay, so that's Couchbase 4.5.1. Up in security here, notice that there is some possibility for external users and roles. You can create read-only users, but that's pretty much the extent of the users that you can do in Couchbase 4.5. Alright. So let's switch over that. So I think that answers the question, how to set bucket password. There is, of course, REST APIs and command line to do that. But that is the very basics there. So what I think is being applied, because that's not very complicated, what I think is being applied by this question is maybe somebody who's using Couchbase 5 or 5.5 or something like that. And there may be confused about how they're moving from 4 to 5, and they're confused about, well, how do I set my bucket password? So I'll show you what I mean here. I'm going to switch over to Couchbase. Let's do 5.5 beta. So 5.5 is currently in beta right now. This will take another little bit of time for this to come up in the browser, for Docker to spin that up for us. So in Couchbase 5, we've made a fundamental change with security, with credentials. So I'm logging into 5.5 here. I'm going to create a bucket, and we're going to call it, again, Matt's Data. Just needs to be a small one. But notice that there is no place to set a password on this bucket. So passwords are no longer tied to buckets. All right? Nothing here at all for that. There's no password field. So I add a bucket, and I cannot access this bucket until I have credentials to do so. So I could use administrator credentials to do it, but I could also go here to security and create a user. So we'll call it Matt, because it's Matt's data, with another terrible password. And so I'm adding a user. I'm giving this user specific roles for the data. So I can give this user access to different roles within this bucket, right? If I just want to allow them to read data and nothing else. I could give them similar access to all buckets. I could give them these administrator and global roles, right? So kind of like cluster admin and admin, there's a few differences in that. If I click admin, I get everything, for instance. But let's go ahead and give just some specific things. So I want to do just data reader and just select queries on this bucket. So I'll add this user, and you can see the roles that are listed here and what you can actually do. So I can execute selects, and I also need reader because I want to actually read the data from the select. So let's go back to buckets here, and we can edit this bucket. And it's interesting that authorized users is showing 0 here, but anyway, so I have access to this bucket, and I can have multiple users with different levels of access to this bucket. I can revoke these credentials, I can change the roles, and so on. So this is a much more role-based approach to security in Couchbase 5. And I'm getting a message, just want to make sure it's not about the stream. No, it's not, so I'll ignore that for now. Okay, so one other thing I want to point out is that's Couchbase Server 5.5. It's in beta right now, but that's basically the enterprise edition of Couchbase 5.5. So I want to also show the community edition of 5, which is not currently released as 5.5. It's only in 5.0.1, so 5.01 community. I'm going to bring that up. And again, it will take a little bit of time for Docker to spin this up. So one of the differences between Community and Enterprise Edition is the types of roles you can actually assign. So the thing they have in common is that you still need to, if I'm going to add a bucket here in Community Edition, and that's data, you still can't put a password on the bucket in Community Edition. So you still need to go and create a user to be able to interact with and access that data. But notice that in Community Edition, the number of roles you can choose is actually much fewer. There's less fine-grained control over those roles. So you can still limit it to just bucket full access, read-only admin, or full admin. But the idea here is that in Community, you may not need to break down into those very specific roles for, you know, a small startup app or a side project app or some other sort of personal use thing. But if you think that you might want to use those individual roles, go ahead and download the full Enterprise Edition, currently in beta right now, 5.5. And that's free for you to use locally on your machine. You don't need a license until you go into production. So if you think you might want that eventually in your project, go ahead and start using the Enterprise Edition right now to test it out. So that's it for that. I hope I answered the question and then some on Google here, which I think, oh, it's over in this tab, which was how to set the bucket password. And really, it's kind of asking, I think, more than just that literal thing. So that's why I brought up the whole thing with roles and security and credentials. Okay, so that's it for this week. I'm going to jump in my truck and drive back to Columbus, Ohio, after spending a whole week streaming here in Michigan. And so I plan to continue the stream again on Monday. And that's it for today. I want to thank you very much for watching. Oh, I forgot to mention, the music today in hold was called Along the Lakeside by NOP, or N-O-P. I'm not sure how to say that. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks very much for watching.